It's a great day to pay a minor leaguer, folks. Colt Keith has gotten the bag from the Detroit Tigers. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster, and thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and today's episode is made possible by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Okay, so the Monday mailbag is almost always nothing but questions sent in by listeners of the show. And if you have one, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball, show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. We've got email, Discord, YouTube comments, tons of ways to get those questions to us. But before we do that, I want to talk about Colt Keith because he got the bag on Sunday from the Detroit Tigers. So news has come out. He has signed an extension, and it is now 7 players that have signed MLB contracts prior to debuting, to getting any service time in the major leagues. And 2 of those guys this offseason between Colt Keith and Jackson Chourio. So this new deal that Detroit has inked him to, it is 6 years and $28.6425 million guaranteed. It is very exact because we have exact figures. Shout out to the Tigers for being willing to give us exact details on the salaries. He starts off making $2.5 million this year, and that goes up until he's making $5 million for 2028 and for 2029. There are 3 separate years of club options on the deals with buyouts for all 3. And if all 3 club options are exercised by the Detroit Tigers, then Colt Keith it'll be a 9-year deal for $82 million for Colt Keith. So, why would they do this? And what does this mean for the Tigers in 2024? When you look at what Colt Keith did last year, it's very clear that he deserves to be considered in the top tier of MLB prospects. So 126 games last year between AA and AAA. 306, 380, 522. 27 homers, 68 extra base hits, 60 walks to 121 strikeouts, and he went 3 of 5 on stolen bases. We talked on the Tigers show just on Friday back in this feed. He was the last prospect that we talked about in the first segment, previewing the top prospects in the system. And if you remember, we talked about the power is easily plus, right? The contact ability is essentially plus as well. Colt Keith's power, 90th, or his average exit velocity is 90. His 90th percentile was 106. Easily plus power. Contact ability, 75% overall contact, 84% in the zone. He doesn't chase a ton. He hits both lefties and righties really well. And the biggest questions you have about Colt Keith, honestly, is defensively, can he stay at second? They played him a lot at third last year, and then they decided towards the end of the year, no, you are going to be a second baseman rather than a third. And so they moved Jace Young out to third base, and Colt Keith is one of the many second basemen, offensive first second baseman in that system. But the thing here with Colt Keith, like again, it's does he stay at second, and defensively, is he good enough to not hurt you in the middle infield? And then what is the transition period like as he gets into MLB? You have to believe that, like, you don't sign a guy to a deal like this if you're not planning on him being the opening day starter at second base, right? You don't pay him this money, and yeah, it's only $2.5 million, but you don't pay him this kind of money to start off the year in the minors. It's the same thing with Jackson Chourio, which we'll get to in a second. And my expectation is he probably starts the year batting, I don't know, 6th or 7th or something. He's not going to be the last guy in the lineup, but he's going to be towards the bottom. I think Roster Resource on Fangraphs had him 6th. MLBPlayingTime.com, which is a great new resource, by the way, go check that out, has him at either 6th or 7th. But I did go in there to Fangraphs while we're talking about Fangraphs and pulled up the Steamer projections and then did the adjustment for 600 plate appearances. The initial Steamer projections for Colt Keith only have him, I think, playing 90 games, and I don't believe they have been updated since the deal was signed. So I went in there and adjusted it for the 600 plate appearances, and Colt Keith's rookie season comes out to 261, 326, 427, 17 home runs, 70 runs, 70 RBIs, and 4 stolen bases. It's just over an 8% walk rate, just under a 22% strikeout rate, and an estimated 2.1 WAR, which, fun fact, is the 3rd highest position player total for the Tigers in 2024, according to the Steamer 600 projections. Just really funny to think about. Yes, the Tigers finished 2nd in the division, and the odds have them at either 2nd or 3rd in the division in 2024, but their number 3 performing position player would be just barely over 2 WAR. Just wild to me. We'll see what happens with Colt Keith. It's a really interesting deal. I like the fact that in the worst case scenario, he can be a free agent again at age 28. And in the best case scenario, if they pick up these options because he's been good enough to warrant a 10, 13, and $15 million salary in 30, 31, and 32, he still hits free agency at the age of 31. And hopefully by the 2033 season, MLB teams are still willing to give money to a guy who is over the age of 30. We'll see what happens there. I also find it really interesting to look at the parallels. Again, we've talked about only now 7 players in modern MLB history have signed contract extensions with 0 days of service time. And 2 of those 7 have been this offseason. And it's funny because the list of the other 5 is full of more deals that didn't work out than deals that did. Astros first baseman John Singleton signed for 5 years, $10 million in 2014. Did not work out. Phillies infielder Scott Kingery signed for 6 years and $24 million in 2018. Reasonably can argue that didn't work out. Eloy Jimenez signed for 6 years and $43 million with the White Sox in 2019. That did work out. Evan White, 6 years, $24 million with the Mariners in 2019. Arguably that did not work out. And then Lou Bob with the Chicago White Sox, 6 years, $50 million in 2020. That did work out. Jackson Chourio's deal, and again, we talked about this on the December 1st show. We went all into detail on that contract and everything. It's important to remember that's a slightly different dollar amount and duration of a contract, but Jackson Chourio is also seen as a different caliber of prospect. Depending on who you ask, he's the number 2 or number 3 prospect in all of baseball, whereas Colt Keith, solidly in the top 100, solidly in the top 50, but not in the realm of top 3 prospects in baseball. And so, again, Colt Keith, 6 years, $28.6 million, and if the club options are picked up, it becomes 9 years and $82, whereas Jackson Chourio got 8 years and $82 million, and if the club options get picked up, it'll be 10 years and $142.5, and he'll still hit free agency at the age of 30. Excited for Colt Keith. Again, it is a great day to pay a minor leaguer. Very excited that this minor leaguer got a major raise. And this should pave the way now for Colt Keith to be the starting second baseman for the Detroit Tigers on opening day. In just a minute, covering some of the questions you guys had from last week's previews, including some detailed conversation about Frank Mozzicato and some more insight that we learned about his performance last year and if it's all attributed to that drop in fastball velocity or not. We'll cover that next, right here on Locked on MLB Prospects. But first, new sponsor alert. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Factor Meals. Get started on your resolutions with Factor so you're ready for the new year. Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success in the new year. You skip the grocery store, you skip the prep work, you skip the cooking fatigue of having to figure out what am I going to make today and then actually doing that. Instead, you get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. They have over 35 meals to choose from per week, including diet-specific options like keto, calorie smart, vegan, vegetarian, whatever, and then over 55 weekly add-ons. You'll have a ton of nutritious and flavorful options to kickstart your resolutions. I took the liberty of pulling up this week's menu from Factor, and there's some really interesting stuff here. Jalapeno lime cheddar chicken, fusilli and ground pork tomato ragu, turkey chili and zucchini, Sunday beef bolognese. You look at next week, February 3rd through 9th, and you've got bacon and spinach shredded chicken, chorizo chili, smoky Gouda chicken, Italian-style pork ragu with cavatappi and garlic broccoli. Really interesting options, right? And then they have, in addition to the ready-to-eat meals, they have cold-pressed juices, smoothies, energy bites, extra protein, extra veggie size, and all kinds of other options to give you the energy, the snacks, everything you could possibly want during your busy day. So head to factormeals.com/LockedOnMLB50 and use code LockedOnMLB50 to get 50% off. That's code LockedOnMLB50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnMLB50 to get 50% off. Okay, following up on some of the shows that we did last week and specific guys that either we didn't get to and you guys want to hear about, or some more in-detail conversation about some of these guys and what happened. Let's talk about Frank Mozzicato of the Kansas City Royals. We talked about him on Tuesday the 23rd in that first segment of the Kansas City Royals show. And you'll remember one of the issues for Mozzicato last year was in his 21 starts between single A and high A, 4.65 ERA in 93 innings. And some of the conversation we had there was about there was an inability to keep on weight. He was losing weight. He lost like 15 or 20 pounds over the course of the season. And so the fastball velocity took a drop to somewhere 90 miles an hour on the fastball, whereas he had been sitting lower to mid 90s early in the year. And we were asked, was it the weight loss that was the primary driver of this? Or was it the fastball shape and some of the issues with the fastball? Like, what was the primary issue there? And then what can be done to fix it going forward? And I think the easy thing to say is obviously finding a way to put on that weight and maintain that weight will help. But more so than the shape of the fastball to me. I was talking to some folks last week around the organization, different prospects who knew Frank. Haven't talked to Frank himself, but different prospects who knew him, people who cover the team on a professional basis, things like that. The fastball velocity obviously didn't help. When you go from 93 to 90 or 89, the margin for error is so much smaller. But then also, his command, which was never amazing to begin with, his command definitely took a hit when the fastball velocity dropped. And when you go back and you watch some of the film, it looks like he is putting in a little bit more effort to make his pitches later in the year. And when you increase the effort, we talk about guys with high effort deliveries and things like that, you usually discuss the high effort delivery and the subsequent damage to the control that it does, right? When you are exerting yourself almost max effort, it's harder to be accurate with the ball. Your command, your control suffers versus when you have a low or moderate effort delivery and you can take a little more care to finally aim it, right? And so as he lost the weight and was trying to find the velocity, he was putting in more effort in the delivery. And he's already somebody who has longer arms and longer arm action. And somebody that I was talking to last week said that it feels like, yes, the weight loss itself is an issue, but also there's some strength work that can be done specifically in the lower half of the body. That Frank Mozzicato doesn't really have enough bulk in the lower body to help provide that stable base and give you that base of power to help generate velocity with. So I think that's something that can be worked on and approached going into 24. But then they also pointed out to me that there's some belief around the organization, around things like that, that when he collided with a teammate in early June, it was like June 1st, right? That he went on the injured list. He came back 2 weeks later, and he was a significantly different pitcher when he came back. So before that collision, and he was still in single A when he had that and when he went out. But before that collision for Columbia, he had pitched 46 and a third innings with a 2.14 ERA and a 64% strike percentage. Okay. His swinging strike rate was 16%. His looking strike rate was 16%. So that's a 32% CSW. We've talked about CSW before, called strikes plus whiffs. The goal is to try to be around 30%, right? So he's above that. He's having good results. After the collision, he pitched 46 and 2/3 innings. So there's the other half of his season, right? And the ERA in that second half, and again, he was only out for 2 weeks, but when he came back, a 7.14 ERA and a 57% strike percentage. His swinging strike rate went from 16% to 11%, and his looking strikeout rate or strike rate went from 16% to 14%. So your combined CSW is now 25. Now, what's hard about this is he had 3 starts when he came back in single A Columbia before he moved to high A Quad Cities. And obviously, if you're having physical issues as far as maintaining weight and the velocity that comes along with that, it makes sense that's going to manifest the farther you go in the year, the worse and worse it's going to get. But it's just really interesting to me. 2 of the 3 starts he had after he came back, it was a combined 5 innings of 8 runs allowed. And so I really have to just wonder and ask, did that have something to do with it? And again, there's people around the organization that believe that collision with a teammate and the injury that came from that bothered him the rest of the year. Too many moving variables to know for a fact which one it was, but I just found that really interesting. And then something else was, apparently he had worked in the offseason in the pitching lab, to develop a slider. And he didn't actually start using it in games until mid-August. So he had it, he worked on it in bullpens, he had, again, done it in the offseason, but didn't actually use it until August. And the last 4 starts of the year, you can see a dramatic difference, not in the strikes, right? Not in the swinging strike rates, not in the overall strike percentage, but you can see a difference in the results. So from August 15th to the end of the year, when he whipped out this new horizontal breaking slider, not a true sweeper, but mostly sweep, a little bit of vertical drop to it, mostly sweep. 19 innings. This was against Beloit, Wisconsin, Peoria, and South Bend. So some good teams. South Bend was a good team for the Cubs. 19 innings, 2.84 ERA. He had a 57% strike percentage, which was the exact same as it was in that second half of the season sample, right? No different strike percentage, but the results were significantly different. And then his swinging strike rate, instead of 11% in the second half, it was 12 for this. And then the looking rate, instead of 14 in the second half, it was, again, 14. And this is what's hard about some of this prospect stuff sometimes, right? Is there's so many things that changed in here. He moved up a level. He came back from an injury. He was dealing with physical issues. It's so hard to know, he added a pitch in the middle of the sample. It's so hard to know what is significant and what is not. But I just found all of that extra backup information and deep dive stuff I was able to find out about after that show came out last week. Thought it was interesting. Wanted to bring it to you guys because the rule of the show and what we try to do here is give the people what they want. In just a minute, quite a few players you guys asked me to dive into. Zebby Matthews of the Twins, Hao-Yu Lee of the Tigers, Misael Urbina of the Twins. We'll talk about all these guys next, right here on Locked on MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you are like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. I thoroughly enjoy, the commercials used to be a thing, not really anymore. Halftime, whatever, it's fine. My favorite part of this is the prop bets for the Super Bowl. Everything from the length of the national anthem, who's going to score first, wild that we had a safety as the first score in 2 straight years, all kinds of fun stuff like that, pages and pages of prop bets. And FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the NFL season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but they have all those fun prop bets. Who will score a touchdown first? How many players will score a touchdown? Which players will score? How many points will be scored? And so much more. So, new customers, join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Final segment of Locked On MLB Prospects here on Monday. And just quick reminder to you real quick that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, soon to come to Amazon Fire and Roku TV devices. Okay, a couple guys that y'all wanted to hear a little bit more detail about that we either didn't get to last week or didn't have enough time to talk about last week. Right-hand pitcher Zebby Matthews of the Minnesota Twins, 8th rounder in 2022 out of Western Carolina, had 22 appearances, 20 of those were starts, in single A and high A for the Twins last year. Went 7-3 with a 3.84 ERA in 105 1/3 innings. 112 strikeouts, so 9.6 per 9, to 15 walks, 1.3 per 9, and 14 home runs allowed, so 1.2 per 9 innings. The thing here with Zebby Matthews is one of those profiles that has a lot of pitches. None of them are amazing, right? But the whole package plays up because he sequences them very well and he has very good control. You can see from the walks, 1.3 walks per 9 innings, that very good at locating exactly where he wants to go. 14 home runs, 1.2 per 9 innings, because when he doesn't locate the right place, it gets rocked. So the fastball, mid-90s, it can touch 96 or so, but from when I go back and watch it, it feels like it plays under its velocity a little bit, and I think some of that might be location. It looks like when he misses, that's one of the few pitches that he misses in the middle of the plate versus missing on the outside of the plate. So a little bit of work there, but I like the overall arsenal. When you watch, he's got a sweeper, which really good against lefties because it's breaking in on them, right? He's got a vertical breaking curveball. You know how I like all those different directions. He's got a cutter that comes at around 90 miles an hour, uses it a lot against righties. So he uses the sweeper a lot against lefties and the cutter a lot against righties. Has a changeup as well. I don't think the changeup is anything special, but it just gives you a different visual look, right? You're covering all the directions. You're covering multiple velocity bands. And again, the control is there, plus control, and the sequencing is there. And so Zebby Matthews feels like a very high floor option for a starting pitcher, a back into your rotation guy who can go out there, take plenty of innings. And then obviously the issue is, can you make some tweaks to raise the ceiling a bit from a back into the rotation to a middle of the rotation guy? If you can get one of those secondary pitches into a plus pitch, because right now, The sweeper, the cutter, the curveball, they're all average to above average. The changeup's the one that's below average. But if you can get any of those into a plus pitch, I think it raises the ceiling from maybe a number 5 to a number 4. And then if the fastball can get a little bit more velocity or vertical break on it, a little better shape, something like that, you could possibly see that plus a better secondary could bring you up into maybe even a number 3 role potentially for the Twins. So interesting arm. I would expect probably double A, but you could see them send him back to high A. Kind of depends on how they feel after spring training about what they want to do with Zebby Matthews. Had a question about Wilmer Flores of the Tigers, the right-handed pitcher. We did talk about him in the end of the second segment on that Friday show, but about what can he do to improve next season. And he's a really interesting scenario, and I think I touched on this on Friday, but his numbers look a lot better if you take out those 2 early season blow-ups, right? Like he gave up 13 runs in 4 1/3 inning. And if you take out those 2 blow-ups, he ends up with a 2.67 ERA in the other 67 innings he pitches before he gets hurt late in the year. I think there's a couple things he has to work on. The fastball velocity needs to be a little bit better. He's sat higher before, and he did miss time with a hamstring injury. I wonder if it had been bothering him for a little while before it got bad enough for him to go on the IL, because the fastball velocity wasn't necessarily where it had been in previous seasons or previous looks that we got at him. And then if you can make the changeup a little bit better, I think that's something too that can really give Wilmer Flores another option and kind of keep guys off of a fastball that doesn't have amazing velocity. I still think he's one of the better pitching prospects in the system. He's obviously not number 1 for them, but I do think that there is still plenty of hope for Wilmer Flores with the Tigers, with just maybe some better health, some better luck, and some little bit of improvement to some of these pitches like you would naturally expect a young pitcher to still improve. Infielder Hao-Yu Lee of the Tigers was another guy we were asked about. He had originally been with the Phillies, and he moved over to the Tigers in the Michael Lorenzen deal. He was the only return from Michael Lorenzen. It was, to me, a surprising return because we talked about this on Friday. That Tigers team was full of offensive first, second baseman. And what is Hao-Yu Lee but an offensive first, second baseman? You're just building the whole ship out of offensive first, second baseman. Reminds me of the Marlins and how they made the postseason last year with just a bunch of second basemen all over. Gene Segura at third, Luis Ariz at second. You took Jazz Chisholm and put him in center field, just a bunch of second basemen everywhere, and you made the postseason out of it. But 75 games between rookie ball and high A for Hao-Yu Lee. He spent the time in rookie ball because he was hurt multiple times, had a bruised knee, had a quad strain, and this is after he missed time in 22 with a broken hand. So the 75 games in between rookie ball and high A, 273, 362, 399, 6 homers, 22 extra base hits, 33 walks to 65 strikeouts, and 16 to 21 on stolen bases. Mostly played second, 55 games there. Did get 7 games at short. But the whole thing here is really good at getting on base, good walks, power's not necessarily there. And the question here is, how can Hao-Yu Lee differentiate himself from the other second baseman in this system? I think being healthy would be great. I wonder if he could get back to some more time at shortstop. The range was the issue, but I wonder if he's fully healthy, can he kick back out to shortstop and give you at least league average defense at shortstop? So I'm curious to see what he does in 24. I would assume, based on only getting 8 games with West Michigan in Detroit's system after the trade, he's probably going to go back there to start 2024. And then outfielder Misael Urbina of the Twins, 102 games in high A, and they were not necessarily good. Had 412 plate appearances, 180, 289, 282, 4 homers, 25 extra base hits, 109 strikeouts, 6 and 9 on stolen bases. The issue for a former top international free agent is he got bigger, he got slower from year to year, but it hasn't manifested in positive ways yet, right? Like his power production, 282, he hit less home runs in high A than he hit the year before in a half-season sample in single A. So he's slowed down. He's no longer able to play center. 78 games in left. He did get a couple in center, but they weren't great. 78 games in left. He can't play center. He's not hitting for power. It's like you need this physical development to be beneficial to you, or else you got to get rid of that extra mass that you have accumulated there. Not writing him off. He is still a viable prospect for the Twins, but you do have work to do because this system already has a lot of lower batting average, higher swing and miss guys, and they at least have power potential like Kalai Rosario, like Emmanuel Rodriguez. And Misael Urbina at this point does not have that. Fantastic week this week. We're doing the NL East this week, so stay tuned to these farm system previews. It's going to be a really fun time. This is my favorite because obviously, as a Braves fan, this is my division. In the meantime, if you got questions for a mailbag, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball, show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. Every other way to reach us, email, Discord, all of that in the episode description, in the show notes. As the Detroit Tigers have reminded us, it's a great time to pay a minor leaguer.